think I know the majority of faces here, so I won't go into too many introductions. I'm technical director at Screen Media. We do loads of web stuff, and we use Umbraco extensively for various different projects. The actual source of what I'm going to talk about tonight came from quite a clear need that we had. I don't know how many of you guys inherit Umbraco sites. I don't know how many of you guys got the email from Doug the other day asking to tell the secrets of Umbraco sites that have been made by other developers that you'd inherited. I haven't replied to him yet. But this came out of a clear need that we had, where we had a project that we were inheriting from somebody else, and we didn't really honestly know how it worked. It was 2,500, 3,000 page site. It had 40 content editors, thousands of media items, and so on. So it was going to be probably close to hell on earth, both to scope what they wanted to do and work out what the hell had already been done. So I got some help from Stephen and Dave working on this, and we've extended it slightly since then. This current version only works with Umbraco 6. It's based on the new API, where you don't have to have the HTTP context available to you, so you don't have to mock any of the nasty stuff that Umbraco used to do by just shoving everything into HTTP context and then running from there. So just to start with, yeah, pretty clear. It has been battle tested. It's been battle tested in various different forms. The client that we created this for, the direct need was for an Umbraco 4.7 site, which has recently been migrated to Umbraco 6, and this was why we needed to upgrade it again, because we needed it to work on Umbraco 6. And so it has been battle tested on that, but just so you know, it works on my machine. Feel free to download it and see whether it doesn't lose. So, as I said previously, obligatory lolcat. Can I test your site? Do you know what the sites that you inherit actually do? Some of the awesome stuff that we found in the site that we took over was there's a template that's loaded that then throws a 404 error, which is actually thrown in code as opposed to just not applying a template to it. So they actually specifically select in the template a 404 template so that it throws a 404. These things can be done purely by not selecting a template, but there was obviously a little bit of a knowledge gap there. There were various other things that kind of were also kind of needed, I guess. But that was one of the clear things where we didn't know why these pages were throwing 404s until we saw that there was a big list of them, and it was because they had the 404 template selected. I don't know how many of you have had a look. How many of you guys have had a look at the code on Bitbucket? Can't. Okay. So, is anybody aware of Selenium? Yeah. I guess you know what Firefox is. You'd be in a bit of trouble if you didn't. And Visual Studio. Selenium is a UI testing kit. You can write Selenium tests in 8 languages? I think HTML, JavaScript, Java, C#, and others. In Visual Studio, you write in C#. But by using XSLT XPath to select objects on the page. So as you would create an XPath query to select something from the old Umbraco XML, you do the same thing on the actual page that you view. And so this is the technology behind it. We started using Selenium before this project, but very, very kind of hands-off approach. Colin did a lot of work building Selenium tests in Firefox using their recorder. So they allow you to record Selenium tests in the browser while you're using the thing, so you can test whether if you hit the button, the error appears correctly. You know, if you don't enter text, the required fields validate, all that kind of stuff. So we've taken that a step further, completely kind of integrated it with the data that's in Umbraco, and used that data to then go through and just walk through an Umbraco site and test the pages as we go. I guess what I'd like to say at the beginning of this is what has been created up until this point works well on everything. So you'll be able to take this, do some of the configuration steps that the first two things that I'll show you, and it will work on your site pretty much immediately, as long as it's Umbraco 6, as long as you've got your connection string right, and as long as you put in the right URL. So there's not a lot of configuration that you have to do. You do have to have a working Umbraco install. So let's get to it. This might flash and disappear for a second. Okay. Right, I can't see that now. That's good. Okay, cool. So waiting for that to come back. So once you've downloaded the project, it's relatively simple. It's just one solution with one project in it. If I switch that off, yeah, we've got just a couple of helper classes in there. I have no idea what that's for, but I'm sure it's useful. An app config, and then a couple other bits and pieces that actually go and are the engine of the thing. As I said, the configuration is relatively straightforward. You have to have an app config that in some ways replicates the standard Umbraco config. You'll see I've commented out a lot of the stuff at the top here, but you'll also notice that there's a lot of kind of Umbraco app key stuff. I've just not gone through and stripped these out. I don't know whether they're needed. There may be, there might not. Yeah, a lot of the other stuff in regard to the modules and that's all kind of just standard Umbraco stuff. I removed some of it and it broke, so I didn't remove it. So at the moment we can probably tidy that up, but that's that will come. So as I said, so download the code, and the first thing you do is you point the URL at the site that you want to test. Today we're going to be testing Gluug.local. Obviously it can be any domain, it doesn't matter. All that happens is the URLs that are created, it just depends on the domain onto them. So as long as the domain's right, it should walk through the site as you'd expect. The second thing you need to do is just literally take the connection string that you have in your Umbraco installation and put it in here. So as you can see here, we've got a nice secure connection string, CMS Gluug, user CMS Gluug, password, and that just goes off and, like Umbraco does, connects to the database and pulls the data out. So I guess just to prove that it actually does just work with that, we're having a bit of space problems, and I'd like to caveat that I'm aware of a bug in the reflection that causes this to error every now and again. It's opening some DLL, or it's trying to find some DLLs that it can't find. You just recompile it and build it and run it again and it works. So some of you might recognise this from the last blog that we were at. So, standard website. So as you can see, this is doing this by itself, and it's literally walking through the site, looking for various different things that we've configured it to look for. As you can see, there's a login area on this, and there's some 404s. So we've got a kind of reasonable starting point to know where we've got some errors. Once this is finished, there we go, just drops us back. This was just because I was in debug mode. It's using NUnit, and so it just throws an exception that what it expected to be empty wasn't empty. So the actual output, the useful stuff, is here. And so if we look at this, what we just did has returned some results, and it's told us that the root page took nearly 4 seconds to load, and then it gradually got quicker as it went along. But as you can see along here, we've also got various different errors that it was looking for. So it was looking for Google Analytics code in the page. It was looking for test content, lorem ipsum type content. It was looking for standard exception errors, razor errors, use control errors, and XLT errors, which we won't get because standard website is now MVC and everything just throws an exception, which is good and bad. And also 404s, so you saw right at the very end there were a stack of 404s. So this is the list, and over here we can see which pages those 404s are applied to. You can also see that Google Analytics isn't applied to the 404 pages, it's missing. So that's a really kind of quick introduction to the system. I guess outside of that, one thing that we wanted to kind of also have on top of that was some of the additional stuff that you would find useful in a general day-to-day kind of context of using this. More Selenium type testing, so like I've got a form, when I press the submit button, does it actually do anything? Those types of contexts, when I enter something into a search box, does it work? So I made it somewhat pluggable. So on the so as you saw, there's a login page, and so what I've just done is I wrote a login page test. So right, I'll just cover a basic the construction of a basic page test. So this is a response 404 page test. Now, Selenium is unable to tell what the actual response header was, so it doesn't know that it was a 404 through that. It doesn't know that 500 was thrown. It only knows what's actually displayed in the page. So what we're doing is we're by using the text that we know should be coming out onto the page, using that to define what the errors that appear are. So as you can see, this is a response 404 page. I'll come on to that later. And this is the text that appears in the spreadsheet at the end once you've run your test. I'll come on to the color later. Again, this is just a way of getting your errors into the thing. And here is our test. So you can see this is an extensive test of 12 lines maybe without spaces. You probably, if you've been using a Braco for a wee while, recognise a bit of XPath. Does the body content contain the words 404? Yes or no question, pretty simple. If it finds it, it responds with an object. So we then test whether that object is null. If the object is null, it hasn't found the text. If the object is null, it has found the text. Is that right? No, it's the other way around. If the object is null, it's not found it. And if the object is null, it has found it. So we then log the result of that test, put it into a repository that's held further up, so that we can then report back on it as we go. There's nothing in the exception, and this is purely for management. You pretty much just put that into all of them.
How can you've got an instance property of that?
Sorry?
Can you scroll down a bit? I'm just wondering why, because I mean, it almost looks like that stuff could be a constructor, so I'm assuming.
Probably, it could probably be in a base class, to be honest. The only issue is you have to change the this here every time because you have to return the correct type for the type of test, for the type of test that you're currently working on. So as it iterates over the URLs, it tests each individual test across each of them. It then puts them into a collection for that specific URL. So you have a list of returned errors for the URL that it's associated with. That just tells you what type of error it was that was associated with it. So yeah, I could probably genericize it, but I haven't got that far yet. This was a Sunday afternoon after we built it, after David built it, and we started to realise that we needed to move it over to Umbraco 6. This was a Sunday afternoon of getting this working so that we could test it on Monday on a project we're working on. Yeah, so as you can see, literally the actual bones of a test is that, and the actual kind of real part of it is pretty much that. You don't have to do a great deal to get a reasonable test result for something very simple, a true-false question on a page. So login page test. This one's slightly more involved. As you see, there's our by statement. This is a standard Selenium statement again, where we're just checking whether there is a form on the page that contains the URL of the URL that we're currently testing. So can I get right, okay, so what are we looking at? Login. Okay, so client area. So we've got a login page here, and what we are looking for is form tag that contains the URL / client area /. Once we've found that, we know that this is a login page. And then we're able to do some additional tests on it. Now, if you've used Selenium in the past just for checking whether things are coming out onto the page, you'll know that you just do a kind of standard true-false test. Selenium's a lot more powerful than that. You can send keys to the page, you can send keys to input boxes. So now we've implemented this. When we get to this page, it'll actually attempt to log in. It'll wait for the login to process, it'll then get back to the page, and then it should expect the output that you would expect, which is right at the very top, you'll see welcome John. So what we're doing here is we're selecting the input box, which is the username box, and we're sending the keys John. And then we're selecting the password box and inputting the totally secure password. And then we are selecting the submit button and clicking it. So what we've done there is, if we did it in here, it would be type John in there, type password in there, and then click that button. But we've done it all through code. We can repeat it 100 times without you going mad. Once you've got that, log in. You wait for it to, or there should be a thread sleeping there probably, just for a couple of seconds while it processes the login. And then the final thing we do is look for I think it's a div with the ID login, and that should contain a text, welcome John, because I'm now logged in. If it does, brilliant. If it doesn't, log it, because that's the bug. So now we've got that in, we should build it.
So that would say it doesn't contain welcome John.
Yeah. Sorry?
It says contains welcome John, that's an error.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
You should write tests for your code as well.
You what? Right test. Test for my test. I should rebuild that, of course. Cool. Right, so let's run our test again. We'll try it without the debug mode this time. takes a wee while. This is end unit. Then it also takes a wee while to connect to the database. This what it's doing now is connecting to the database, creating the URLs that it needs, and then it just dumps them into a big list. Then it starts the process. Yeah, that's the block. Okay.
Can anybody see stop there?
So it stopped. Yeah.
Is it?
Stopped, yeah. Because it's only happened during the unit test.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't happen in build, but it's because it's the reflection that goes back onto it that's looking for the libraries that it's trying to get to. I presume there's something somewhere every now and again that it just finds can't find it. So there we go. You saw it. It entered John, it entered the password. They clicked the button. It waited for the page to return the welcome John, and so that should have passed. It didn't pass because there's always errors. There's always 404s, but we've got a new report, and we can see that the login page test has now been added to the output. And did we get an error? No, we didn't get an error because it found what it was looking for. Now, I asked permission before I went and broke the awesome work of Chris. But, what else? So I just wanted to illustrate, at the moment we're not seeing any exceptions. As you can see from the list here, there are no exception errors being produced. If we just throw an exception on that, pop back out here again, run it, we'll now get exception errors all over the place, and it will log them. So this is great for times when, like, if your database server's flaky and, you know, just randomly under heavy load or under very, very fast page loads, it starts to die, or if your IS server's beginning to creak a little bit, you know, these things. So we've got some crazy error on pretty much every page. That's a pretty heavily used razor file, by the looks of it. So, again, back to our test output, exceptions, and we've got them everywhere. So, exceptions all over the place, except on the 404 pages, which is awesome. Cool. So that's an example of a kind of slightly more complex test. You know, I presume you can kind of see where this could go. If you've got Ajax functionality in the UI as well, you can sit and you can load Ajax objects. You can do, like, if you've got a scroll down the page loader, you can make sure that as you move gradually down the page, it will load the content as you'd expect it. If you've got a load button for additional Ajax, you know, that makes Ajax calls, you can then sit there and wait for the Ajax to return the content that's rendered out to the UI. Then you can test whether the UI has actually received the data, whether it's actually outputting correctly. So the second slightly more complicated test was a contact form test. So I'll just switch that exception off here. So the contact form test, again, this enters information into the contact form, and I've set this up to, there's an email field, and so I input a bad email address. Again, as we go down, we click it, we wait, and then it should return invalid email address. So we'll build it, run it, and find out whether it does. I guess one thing to say at the moment, Umbraco 6 is using the no longer using the HTTP context to make requests to the database, which is deliver content to the UI. However, things like library.niceURL and anything that's pretty much not based around document management still uses the HTTP context to make the requests and output the content. So if you attempt to do niceURL in a project like this that doesn't have the HTTP context available to it, it doesn't work. So at the moment, this is a purely faked URL builder where it just says, get me the name of it, get me the get me the hierarchical name of it, and then just go back and put slashes in between them, and then fire them out. Once they've fixed the issues with the umbraco.niceURL, or sorry, library.niceURL, that'll be resolved, and we'll be able to get alternate templates on pages working. So, don't know if you saw that, but it entered the information into the contact page, and the error that was returned was incorrect text, not what it should have been, which was invalid email address. So, with luck, our new test that we just added, which is the contact form test, should have worked on the contact form, but through an error because the text that it found in the page was wrong. So again, this is something that I modified within Chris's awesome project, and if I can only find it. I replaced invalid email address with incorrect text. So it worked.
See when it reads the text, like after you perform the action,
Yep.
what happens if that's like on a different page? If you're like posting a form and redirect to another page, could that read the result or something else? Is it just whatever's...
Yeah. It will wait for, I believe it will wait for the process of whatever the click action is to complete, and then it will read whatever the result of
So
that
even
is.
if the page is changed, it just read that?
Yeah. So if you redirect to another page, or, I mean, there's, just go back to the other project. For example, if these are obviously selecting input boxes at the moment, but they could just as easily be selecting anchor tags. And if you went through those anchor tags and wanted to click on an anchor tag that you found, right. Obviously, if you wanted to check for dead links, you would have to hit the anchor tag, then go back, then hit another anchor tag, then go back, and then hit another anchor tag. There are probably better tools for that type of thing, but certainly, getting from page A to page B, you can definitely make sure that you go from page A to page B, and the result of page B is what you expect it to be.
Cool.
Right, okay. So, as I said earlier on, I kind of said ignore can screenshot and pen color. Because Selenium's quite awesome, you can do some cool stuff like take a screenshot of all of the pages that you've just tested. You can also draw boxes on the page where you've seen where the error is. So if it's not completely obvious already, Test text in the content is obviously a green box, but as you go through, James earlier said to me that there is a graphics memory leak in here, which is true, hence the multiple green boxes. But yeah, you can see, so is that blue, possibly? Blue is obviously 404 pages, and you can configure those just by changing the pen colour. And each, so just to confirm, 404 pages are blue, and what was the other one we looked at? Lawrence test content dark green. So it takes a screenshot, draws on the screen the type of error that it's found. So obviously, if you have multiple errors on one page, you'll get a green box and a red box and a yellow box and a blue box if you've got different types of error on a page. I guess that's it. So, any questions?